session, 12 ways to defeat multi-factor authentication. Please give a warm welcome to KnowBe4's data-driven defense evangelist, Roger Grimes.
Hey. I like that. That was a good radio voice. Hello, I'm Roger Grimes. Thanks, everybody. I see a lot of friends in the audience. I'm with KnowBe4. We're the world's largest security awareness training platform, so we're trying to prevent people from clicking on phishes and lots of other things that can hurt you. Again, Roger Grimes. I've been doing computer security for 32 years. I've earned all the gray hairs. Worked for a lot of different companies like Microsoft and McAfee and stuff like that. I've written 11 books, working on my 12th book. About 1,000 magazine articles. I've been the InfoWorld and CSO magazine columnist since 2005. So if you hate that guy, I am that guy. Here's some of my books. The latest one, the Cryptography Apocalypse, is coming out November 5th, and that's just about how quantum computers is getting ready to crack most modern day crypto, public key crypto, and I'm excited about that one. But my 12th book that I'm working on now is How to Hack Multi-Factor Authentication. Some people ask also, what is a data-driven defense evangelist? Besides that, it's a made-up title that I made based upon one of my books. It's also, I help people put the right defenses in the right places and the right amounts against the right threats, because believe it or not, most companies don't do that. But today we're going to talk about how to hack multi-factor authentication. It kind of came about 2 years ago, a little bit less than 2 years ago. Kevin Mitnick did a demo of himself, and you're going to see that video today. But he did a video where he hacked some multi-factor authentication, and it seemed to set the world on fire. People went crazy. There's so many journalists calling in that our PR department said, Roger, can you handle some of the questions and answers that Kevin couldn't get to? I said, sure. And I was surprised by how many people are like, has Kevin reported this particular hack? Because it was a very common, average, everyday multi-factor authentication attack that I've seen for 30 years. But they're like, has Kevin reported it as a new common vulnerability exploit, CVE? I was like, no, it's not new. It's been around forever. They're like, oh, well, I guess it's, and he had hacked LinkedIn. And again, you're going to see it in about 5 minutes. But they're like, oh, well, that's because Microsoft security sucks. And I was like, no, their security doesn't suck. It's just it's just the way this MFA works, and if you are able to hack it, it works. I said it would work against any website that uses this type of multi-factor authentication. I said, as a matter of fact, I can think of 10 ways to hack multi-factor authentication off the top of my head. And so then I went and wrote a column for CSO Magazine that night, and by the end of that column, I had 11 ways. The next day, I ran into Stu, the CEO of the company, and we're in a morning meeting. He's like, oh, you ought to do a presentation. By the time I got through the presentation, I had 12. I think this presentation version has 18 in it. We'll see what we get to in an hour today. But I'm up to 38 ways to hack multi-factor authentication, and I can at least 5 to 7 of the, you can hack any multi-factor authentication method at least 5 to 7 ways at least. Most of the time I can do 11 to 12 ways. A lot of times I'll have multi-factor authentication vendors that are trying to make really cool unhackable products. I hack them all. I used to accept them for free to show them I could hack them because it doesn't take long to hack them, but now I charge them $40,000 because I just don't want to do it. They can all be hacked. Let me see. Y'all can't see that power. Okay. So first we'll talk about authentication and multi-factor authentication in general, but you have authentication factors, so it's something like a password or a PIN, or you're connecting dots on your phone or something like that, something you have like a USB token, RFID chip, smart card, dongle, or something biometrics. So it could be fingerprints, retina, iris, can be handprint geometry, it can be sound, voice recognition, and even smell. I actually worked once on a project for Microsoft and U.S. government, Army, actually it's U.S. Army, to try to recognize people based upon their smell. And I could have told them it was a failure because people smell a lot different after they've been drinking all night or eating garlic, and it changes the way they smell. But also, this is happening more and more. We have these contextual behavioral tools, factors that come in to try to authenticate somebody. So that's when you log into most of the big websites, whether it's Gmail or Hotmail or something like that, they actually look to say, are you at a location where you could have been 2 hours ago when you can you log in here and also China an hour apart? Are you doing things you would normally do? Even if you're on those websites where they ask you to put in your login name and then you have to hit next and go to another screen for your password, they're actually measuring how long it takes you to type in your password, every keystroke. So if you all of a sudden you're taking too much time to put in your password, they'll actually mark that down as a factor against you. When I was at Microsoft and we were doing the Hotmail behavioral contextual attributes, we had over 200. that we looked at every time someone logged on in. We'd give you a risk score, and if you exceeded the risk score, then we would hit you for some other type of authentication, stepped up authentication they call it. But when you have multi-factor, you've got single-factor authentication, then you have multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is 2 factors or more. 2-factor is multi-factor. And what you want to, if you want all things being equal, if you want more protection, you want to use multiple different factors, meaning that if I have a multi-factor authentication solution that asks you for a password and a PIN, those are 2 things that you know off the top of your head, or ask you to connect the dots and also for your password or something like that. That's not as strong as if I ask you for your PIN and ask you that you also have to have a device. The conventional thinking is that it's harder for a hacker to get both. And it may be harder, but it's not impossible. Factors can also be in-band, meaning on the device that you're trying to authenticate to, or maybe they send you the authentication factor on your cell phone using an SMS short message. That would be out-of-band or something like that, or they call you on your phone. All things considered equally, out-of-band factors are considered stronger than in-band factors because the in-band factor can be compromised easier. You can also have one-way versus two-way authentication. Most authentication is one-way, meaning that it's client authenticating the server, server authenticating the client, but it's not both. 99.9%. Anytime I say 99.9%, I'm just making it up, and I really don't know the stat, but it means a lot. Most of it is one-way authentication, and that's because it's easier, faster. So like when you connect to a website that has an HTTPS TLS certificate, and don't say SSL. I hate seeing SSL connections. That's, that's broken, it's compromisable. It's TLS certificates. But when you connect to that, it sends you a certificate proving digital certificate proving its identity to you. That's a one-way authentication. Then if you type in your password, that's another one-way authentication that happens. When you have two-way authentication, like you might with Kerberos, you actually have to have both client and server authenticate at the same time before either one will accept the authentication. And two-way authentication is better than one-way authentication, but it breaks a lot. It doesn't work with firewalls and load balancers and that sort of stuff. So a lot of things will have two-way mutual, will have both one-way and two-way, like you do FIDO keys. If you do that, it has one-way and two-way with what's called channel binding, but they don't enable it by default. And when you don't enable it by default, well, it means nobody really uses it. But it does. So a lot of these will have one-way and two-way, but they only implement the one-way by default because it works more often. So a lot of times after I give this talk, I've had people tell me, oh my God, multi-factor authentication doesn't work anymore. I thought that was going to save my life, but it doesn't work. What should I do? You should use multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is better than single-factor authentication, better than passwords most of the time. Although I can compromise some things. I can compromise a couple of multi-factor authentication solutions easier than passwords. So there are some instances where passwords are actually better, but not most of the time. Most of the time, you want to use multi-factor authentication where it makes sense. It doesn't always make sense. If you're going to just Google something, you don't want to have to log on in for that, right? You just want to do your Google search and find your answer. You're downloading a public document. You don't want to have to authenticate. But the key thing is, in this talk, is that MFA isn't unhackable, because I have a lot of people that think it is unhackable and they don't educate their employees. Like they'll say, oh, we're using multi-factor, we can't be phished. Nope, you can be phished really, really easily. And if you're training people that they can't be phished or something can't be stolen or it protects them in some special way, you're not doing computer security right. Authentication, just in general, has 3 major pieces. The identity or the identifier, that's some type of label. It could be a login name, could be an email address, could be a private key certificate or the subject in the certificate. It could be a global unique identifier, but in every authentication system, they need a way to track you uniquely within that namespace. A namespace being Active Directory or DNS or LDAP or something like that. But you have to have a unique label that identifies you as you're logging on in, or your device as it's logging on in that namespace. Authentication is the thing that I'm going to prove. I'm going to provide some secret that only the authentication system and me supposedly knows to prove that I have ownership and control of the identity. And I could be asked to have one or more factors. It's usually done at the beginning, and after you authenticate, it never asks you again. Every once in a while, it will ask you again. That will probably be more common in the future. And then you have authorization. Authorization is you have successfully authenticated, and when you successfully authenticate, you typically get this access control token or a ticket, but it just means, hey, here's your driver's license. You've been successfully authenticated, and then when you go to access a protected resource like a file or a folder or a website, you just hand over your ticket, and you've already been authenticated, and then it will look, okay, this really is Roger Grimes, and here's the groups and permissions and privileges that's assigned to his account, and this is what he can do with this resource. So you go through these 3 steps. you get this token, but this right here is huge. If I've lost you, if you're falling asleep with my rapid staccato voice already, fire hose of information here, pay attention to this. Because 99% of computer security people, just like me, don't understand this concept. It's that after you log on in, no matter how you log on in, whether it's one-factor, two-factor, whether it's biometric, whether it's smell, whether it's a password, you're going to get the same token. And what I mean by that is if I'm on a Windows laptop and I use a fingerprint scan, after I successfully authenticate using my fingerprint, I'm going to get an NTLM or an NT ticket or Kerberos ticket. And if I log in with the password, I'm going to get an NT token or a Kerberos ticket. You know, no matter how you, or if you go to a website, any website that you successfully log into is going to send you a text file cookie. And if you have that access control token, it's as if you're the person that just successfully logged on in. And that's kind of the hack that I'm going to show you first when we get to it, is that if you can get that access control token, they don't care how you authenticate it. It's not any different. I guess prior to this, that epiphany one day, I thought like if I logged in with a fingerprint, that fingerprint was somehow like moved around the network. You know, like, oh, I'm going to access this directory or this database. I thought like somehow it took my fingerprint and sent it to the database, like, yep, that's Roger's, finger, index finger. That's not what happens. You usually, when you're doing fingerprint scanning, usually it's all done here locally. It may be done across the network, but usually it's just a local database and service on your laptop. You get that Kerberos ticket or token, and then that's what's always presented to all the resources you're trying to access. So once you've authenticated and it gives you that token or ticket, it's just like any other person. It could be as if someone put in a password or no password. And that's how a lot of the hacking happens. So hacking MFA can be done through social engineering or a technical attack against underlying technology, or it could be done physically. It's usually a combination of all of these, or at least two of these. I have some MFA people, when I hack their solution, like, oh, you didn't hack our solution, you hacked DNS, or I hacked some other thing. They're like, that's not fair, you didn't hack our solution. I'm like, well, did the user rely upon your product, and then I was able to get around it like it wasn't there? They're like, yes, but it wasn't our fault. I'm like, well, too bad you can't hack in a lab all the time, right? If someone's relying upon your stuff and some other mechanism is able to be hacked, the customer doesn't care. But I'm going to try to show you as many as I can today. We'll probably at least get to 12 to 15 or something like that. Some MFA solutions are better than others at preventing attacks, but none of them are unhackable. Matter of fact, I worked with this one MFA vendor. They're like, I don't want to be hacked. I want to stop all attacks. So and actually, I kind of hated the guy at first, but he kind of wore off on me over time, and I kind of liked him. You know, after I was like, this guy's just putting up, because I was just being cruel to him every time I was just hacking this thing. I was like, your product's horrible. But eventually he made this really good 7-factor product that, I'm not making this up, actually required that you do math. He would present a problem on the screen that you solved. It was some basic addition or subtraction or whatever, and it gave you a number, and you printed up, it had this sheet that you printed up when you first installed the product, and you looked up a number, and it gave you a color. And that product truly did work. It stopped every type of attack. I was like, but nobody's going to use this. But he's like, no, I think people that are in the NSA. I'm like, nope, I've trained at the NSA for 15 years. They're not going to use this. So you can get truly much harder to hack solutions, but people aren't going to do 7 factors to go log on to Amazon, right? Or to do their job. But what we're going to talk about, the first one is this session hijacking, where I steal the cookie or I guess the cookie. It can be done, the simplest way is just guessing that number. A lot of times when you log into a website, you're supposed to get this random unique number that's tied to you, that's a global unique identifier for you. A lot of times it's in the cookie, sometimes it's in the website URL. And if you're a web programmer hacker type, penetration tester, you're always looking at URLs. And what you're looking for is to see, hey, if I log in once and it gives me a particular number, does it sequentially update? Because that number should be random and unique, and a lot of times they aren't. And this happens all the time on big websites. It seems to be one of the most common problems. It's a known problem that's been around for decades, where the numbers are, instead of being random and unique, they end up being sequential. And what every hacker worth his salt will do is change that number. Hey, I'm in as 56. Let me try 57 or 45. And you log in, all of a sudden, many times you're that person out of the blue. And that's where they do a lot of the data theft dumps that have been done is just an attacker doing that. They create a script, cycle through all the possible numbers, and then are able to see other people's data. And the defense is the website developer should make sure all unique identifiers are randomly created and non-trivial to guess. But probably the more common one is network session hijacking. It usually requires you have a man-in-the-middle attack. That means there's something that's able to pick up the network traffic in between source and destination. It's not really hard to do at all. It can be done with a phish. They don't care how you authenticated. They just want to steal that resulting legitimate access control token. And there's lots of different ways to do it, but I'll show you this one. This is the one Kevin's going to kind of mimic here in his video. But a bad guy convinces a person to visit a rogue website. Usually it's some sound-alike, look-alike website, which is actually proxies all the information that the user types into the real website, and then all the input coming back or output or direction from the website is proxied through that middle proxy. So they're getting all information to and from the real website. So if the real website says you need to put in multi-factor authentication, it just proxies that information onto it and then captures whatever it can. So after the user successfully authenticates, the proxy just steals that resulting access control token that allows the bad guy to take over that account. I'm going to show you this Kevin Mitnick. Kevin Mitnick's our chief hacking officer, the world's most infamous hacker. He's been hacking since he was a little kid. But this is the demo that when he showed that it just made like 100 media requests come on in. But it's kind of cool. He's hacking LinkedIn, but this would work with many, many websites. But let me show you his video.
KnowBe4's chief hacking officer. And a lot of people ask me if they enable two-factor authentication on the websites that they use, does that stop phishing attacks? And let's take a look at that. So what exactly is two-factor authentication? That's when you log into a website, for example, and not only do you have to put in your username and password, but the website actually sends you a code via SMS, or you might have an application on your mobile device that displays a code that you have to enter into the website to log in. And that is proving that you actually have your mobile device. So it's a form of authentication that's based on something that you have, and your password is something that you know. So a good friend of mine developed this demo, Kuba Gretzky, that demonstrates how a bad guy could phish you even though you've enabled two-factor authentication. So let's take a look at how this works. So I'm logged into my Gmail account, and if you take a look in the second email here, I'll go ahead and open it. It appears to be an email from LinkedIn. And ordinarily, when somebody wants to join your network on LinkedIn, LinkedIn will actually send an email to your email address notifying you of that. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and click interested, log into your LinkedIn account, and authorize that person to actually become a connection. So if we take a look here, we have an email from LinkedIn that says, Kevin, I've read about your adventures in Ghost in the Wires and so on, and this person wants to join my network. But this is actually a phishing attack. If we take a look here at where the email is originating from, it's not at linkedin.com, it's at this domain called llnked.com, which people might overlook. So let's go ahead and pretend that we're the victim here and go ahead and click on interested. And what that is going to do, it's going to redirect us to the LinkedIn website to go ahead and log in. But let's move this over to the right and let that load. And if you take a look over here, we have a blank white page, which is going to become very important in a moment. And this is the attacker terminal session. So let's go ahead and bring back the virtual machine that's now connected to LinkedIn to authenticate, because we, again, clicked on interested in the email. So we'll go ahead and put in a username, Johnny Boy at mitnicksecurity.com. And now we're going to go ahead and put in our secret password. And then we're going to go ahead and click sign in. And when we click sign in, it's not going to allow us to log in. What LinkedIn is going to do is request our two-factor authentication code that LinkedIn is going to actually send to my mobile phone. And in a moment, you should hear a sound that the text message was received on my mobile phone. So let's go ahead and click sign in. And here we go. It's telling us that two-step authentication is enabled. We just heard a message come into my mobile device. We're going to uncheck this box that says recognize this device in the future. And I'm going to open my mobile device to take a look and see what the text message is, or what the code is rather. So the code here is 421476. We're going to go ahead and click verify. And when we do so, it's going to log us into my LinkedIn account. So now we're logged into the LinkedIn account, but let's take a look at the attacker session over here on the left. So we're going to scoot this over to the right. And over here, what we have is what we're able to intercept. So we're able to intercept the email address, which is johnnyboy@mitnicksecurity.com. We're also able to intercept the password to the account, which is KnowBeforeRocks. And over here, this is not the actual 6-digit code that was intercepted, because you can't really use the 6-digit code again, the second factor. But what we're able to do is intercept the session cookie. And if you're able to steal the session cookie, or if rather the attacker is able to do so, they don't even need your username or password or second factor code. They could simply load the session key into a browser and they actually become you. So let me show you how this works. We're going to highlight the cookie. We're going to copy it to the clipboard, and then we're simply going to open up Chrome in incognito mode. And incognito mode just means with privacy. So now we're going to go to the real LinkedIn website. When we go here, obviously we're not authenticated. Now it's, wants us to log in with our credentials, but we don't have to do so. We're going to go ahead and go into developer tools. We're going to go into the console, and what we're going to paste into the console is the session cookie that we stole from the victim, which was myself, by the way. I'm going to enter it. I'm going to go ahead and close the session. Now, all I simply have to do to be logged into the victim's account with their session cookie is simply hit refresh now. So I hit refresh, and here we are. We've logged in, or rather hacked, my own account. So, will two-factor authentication actually stop phishing attacks? Well, you can see that the answer is simply no. So what do you need to do to protect your organization? Well, of course, you need to have user education and training. That's a no-brainer. But you also have to conduct simulated phishing attacks, so you can inoculate your users against this type of risk. And more importantly, you have to stop, you have to look and think before you click that link.
Pretty wild, huh? I don't think anyone that's seen that the first time, if you haven't seen it before, is thinks it's you can literally be sent a regular phishing email and someone can get around your two-factor authentication like it's not even there. And people went, oh, LinkedIn's hackable. He then did it to Gmail and PayPal and a bunch of others to prove. And they were asking, like, how is this possible? Is Microsoft or whoever going to do a patch update? I'm like, no, it's not a bug. They're going to say it's as designed. It's the way. It's just an inherent weakness that if you trick someone into going to the wrong place and you get their access control token has nothing to do with that multi-factor authentication. You just grabbed the successful factor, the ticket that they got from it. But it's a lot of people think, oh, if I'm using two-factor, or I can tell my employees, oh, you don't have to worry about being phished out of your password. Well, you may not have to be worried about being phished out of your password, but it doesn't mean you can just willy-nilly go to any website that comes up in an email. If you're interested in the tool that he used called Evil Jinx, it's been around for like 10, 15 years, and there's probably at least 2 or 3 dozen tools that do the same thing. It's been around forever. I've been watching these sort of attacks since 1985. They happen in the real world all the time. Here's some guy complaining that he had all of his cryptocurrency stolen. He said it appears that he was sent to a fake Binance website, so that's like a Coinbase type website where you can buy and trade cryptocurrency. And they hacked his 2FA security, and they used the fake site requested 2FA via the Google Authenticator. So it was a completely different authentication mechanism. Lots of people use. And then during that particular attack, the attacker had 60 seconds that they could replay that cookie and then take over that session. So it happens all the time. Matter of fact, Iranian phishers bypassed 2FA protections offered by Yahoo Mail and Gmail, millions of accounts. It happens all the time. Again, it's been done to the tune of millions. It's been around forever. Man, this is a different type of attack. This is man in the endpoint. If malware or a hacker gets on your computer or your device, it's game over, right? They're there. At the very least, they could steal your cookie, right? That resulting session access control token, just take it and copy it to their computer. Or they can even behind the scenes start like a second browser session and do something different. They can invalidate your protection altogether. I've seen people that have wiped out the encryption key. As a matter of fact, the NSA and CIA loves to do that. When they break into someone's computer, they'll take it and change a person's encryption key and digital certificate to be one that they know. so they can read and decrypt all the communications. They did that as part of finding bin Laden years ago. And they can just invalidate the protection altogether, put in, backdoor Trojans, that sort of stuff. But this is one that I saw the first time I wrote about this was 1987, called a Bankos Trojan. So they call them they're banking Trojans, but they happen in South America. Bankos means banking in Spanish, I guess. But I remember when I wrote about this, it blew me away because what they did was they would be broken into the computer, and they would let the person log in, and then they would just steal money. They would just start a second hidden browser session, so the person thinks that they're going to look at their account or transfer $50 to their kid, and behind the scenes like, yep, I want you to close the account out and transfer all this money to China or Russia or some Russian, a lot of times it was Russian bank accounts. And that was such a big deal, and it happened against millions of people in South America that they instituted two-factor authentication through the phones, through SMS over the phones. And I was like, all right, we have a solution. Nope, they just updated the Trojans they used. And today they're very sophisticated. They actually listen, they'll monitor what you type in on your browser and monitoring for a particular banking website or investment website, and then they kick off and they steal your money. They have limits, like they know that if Bank of America is going to, are you sure you want to transfer $10,000? They'll only ask for $999. A lot of times they'll switch your phone numbers and your email addresses and that sort of stuff before they make the request. So if someone's like, are you sure you want to transfer this much money? It's already been transferred. So-called banking Trojans, they've been around forever. Here's one gang that just got caught a couple, last year in May, or this year in May, but they stole $100 million, 41,000 victims, and this is just one gang. They also do it on mobile phones. So there's this Trojan, if it got on the system here, would wait for you to use PayPal. And when you authenticated to PayPal using 1-factor, 2-factor, 15-factor, whatever it is, it would just then use PayPal and steal all your money. And that happened on mobile phones. There's a YouTube video you can watch of that. But anyway, so it's been around forever. If if your device or computer gets compromised, it's game over. SIM swapping is a little bit different. So SIM stands for Subscriber Identity Module. Most cell phones used to they have this SIM information, and it goes with your phone. It used to be in a little micro SD card, and when you got a new phone, you had to take the old micro SD card out and put it in the new phone. But that card had this information, and the information would be a global unique identifier for your phone. It also would identify the network that it works with, AT&T or Verizon Wireless or whatever, and then it would have your name and your telephone number, sometimes your account information. And it used to be you had to transfer that micro SD card. These days, you don't have to do that as much, especially on iPhones and stuff. You just you get a new phone, you call a number, put in pound 41, hit the pound sign, and then it re-flashes your phone and the information is there. But essentially, wherever your SIM information is your phone. And what attackers learned is that they could steal that information and then intercept your SMS messages. So SMS is short messaging service. It has absolutely no authentication. It is so hackable, the US government and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, 3 years ago in their new digital identity guidelines, it's NIST special publication 800-63-3, 3 years ago said, SMS is so easy to hack and has been hacked so many times, do not use it as an authentication method. It's literally in the government guidelines. With that, 99% of government websites use SMS as their authentication guideline. Include what I love is my ID expert, MyCare. That's the credit service they gave me to monitor my credit after my fingerprints were stolen from the U.S. government. 5 million fingerprints were stolen. They said, use that to monitor your credit. Bank of America, I cannot do service with Bank of America unless I use their app or their SMS code. There's Microsoft, there's Google, there's Facebook. It's the most, so my advice for anybody using SMS authentication is don't use it, except for it's 99% of the web. Again, I'm making that stat up. It's probably only like 97% of the web today, but it's still used all the time. And the U.S. government has said for years, don't use it. But what attackers do is they move your SIM information to their phone. So a lot of times what they'll do is trick you. They'll do a phishing attack against you, claim to be from your phone company. Maybe they even call you from the phone company. They get your login name and password or account information for your phone company. Then they call the phone company and the tech support and I got a new phone, or I dropped my phone or something like that. I need you to switch it over to my new phone. The Verizon Wireless or AT&T tech support person does it. Sometimes they pay them. There was a big gang in Miami where they were stealing hundreds of millions of dollars of cryptocurrency, and they were paying the inside guy $70 a SIM swap. And I thought, boy, was he being cheated. And no doubt, he'll probably be the one that goes to jail the longest. But lots of people lose their money that way. I just say this food writer, Jack Monroe, I just heard about that one just last week. There's $24 million sold from AT&T smartphone crack. Another $5 million over here, and Binance use. You poor cryptocurrency people. I kind of like cryptocurrency. I invested. I get out. I got in, got out. But I talk to a lot of cryptocurrency people. They do not trust multi-factor authentication anymore. They have gone to either offline accounts or back to login name and passwords because they get so hacked so much, which is pretty wild. Even Red was using that as their internal IT system. They got hacked. And not only did they hack the company and steal all the customer data information, but they installed a backdoor Trojan and they updated the firmware code of regedit so they can infect more systems. And they were infected, I think, for a month before they noticed. So again, defenses: don't use SMS-based apps. It's better to have a phone app. If you have, like I have a Bank of America phone app, much better. But of course, I can hack those too, but it's better than SMS. SMS is just horrible. And I'll show you another one. I'm going to show you an SMS hack that's so easy to do that you can do it. I do not want you to do it without asking for the person's, people go, Roger, you can't hack me. I'm like, yes, I can. Give me 2 weeks. I then wait 15 minutes. I go do this hack and I break into them. You should ask permission first, get it written down, and do not do anything bad to them once you take over their account. But it is so easy, it's hard to even say that you're a hacker. All you need is their email address and phone number. Basically, you just pretend to be from tech support. Hey, I'm from Google Security, so if you know they use Gmail, I'm from Google Security. We've detected rogue sign into your good guy at Gmail account credentials. In order to determine the legitimate login, we're going to send you a verification code to your previously registered phone number from another Google support number. Please retype the sent verification message in response to this message, or your account will be permanently locked. You got to make sure you threaten that. If it's Instagram or something like that, you're going to take away all those photos or whatever. Or, no, I don't know. Instagram, we're going to show all the photos you thought you deleted, something like that. But then you go to their account. If you go to Gmail, you can say, oh, I forgot my password. So you just log in using their email address, claim that you forgot your password. Gmail's nice, like, hey, you want to try your last password? Nope, I really don't know it. It'll then give you 5 or 6 ways to recover that information. All of those other ways are actually more secure, but you can choose SMS. Out of it, you're allowed to, as the user, to choose the method you want to, and it will say, I'm going to send it to this phone number. It then sends that phone number to the victim. And look, you can't tell the difference between that one and the one I just sent. There's no way to authenticate SMS. If you have an iPhone, I can fake the phone number where it's coming from, and I can actually duplicate Apple Tech Support, and we'll actually convert the phone number to say Apple Tech Support. It's very nice, very user-friendly. So you get that code. You type it in, you take over you get that code, go to the website, take it over, you change their login name and password or whatever the method is they're allowed to log in. This has happened at least tens of thousands of times, if not hundreds of thousands of times. It's super simple. Many times we'll tell people, I can hack you, I can phish you. And they're like, no, you can't, Roger. Yes, I can. And this is the way, this is like the secret I tell people. It's just so simple. I tell them, give me 2 weeks. And then I send this 15 minutes later, and it gets them every time. They don't expect it. There's one for Instagram where someone got a message here. Hey, someone's tried to log into your Instagram account. If it wasn't used, please use the following code to confirm your identity and log in here. But it's all fake, and when they go to sign on in, they'll get another code. That code's the real one. They put it into the proxied website and take over. Very easy. Defenses, be aware of rogue recovery messages. Think of it, every time you've been sent an SMS PIN, where do you type that PIN into? Into either the browser or the application or something. You don't type it back into SMS. Although I used to be able to say, never type in an SMS sent code back into SMS, but now my credit card company's like, Roger, are you sure you meant to buy this large TV? Yes or no? And they're all doing it through SMS. I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I do want the TV, but I don't know if this is real. And actually, I get freaked out now. Like my cable company called and said, Roger, we want to upgrade your bandwidth. We're going to double your download speed from 1 gigabit to 2 gigabit or something. I was like, cool, and it's not going to cost you anything. I'm like, cool. They're like, all we need is your login information. I was like, what's your PIN? I said, well, I know my PIN. If you tell me what you think my PIN is, and I'll confirm whether or not it's real. But the person on the phone said, hey, I can't confirm. I can't even get into your account without your login information. I was like, well, can I call you from a main Comcast number? And they're like, no, we're out of the Philippines or something like that. I was like, I guess I don't get the update or the upgrade. But I don't trust anybody. And when Microsoft calls and says you have a virus, we all know it's not really Microsoft, right? But our friends and parents, I worked for Microsoft for 15 years, 12 times full-time employee. If you knew the right number, if you could Google and find Bing, if you could Bing and find the right tech support number, and then you had a credit card and you offered them $300, they still probably wouldn't help you. If they did help you, they do it begrudgingly. That's the way Microsoft tech support really is. But somehow people think that Microsoft's calling ahead of time. Hey, just want to let you know, we detected a virus on your Mac computer. That's what's funny. It's like, we detected a virus on your Windows computer. It's like, I have a Mac. We meant your Mac computer. This one, social engineer tech support. You can socially engineer anyone. It is, when I was a professional penetration tester for 20 years for Foundstone and Microsoft and other people. I broke into every place I wanted to break into in an hour or less, except for one place that took me 3 hours, and that's because I was back a second time. My most favorite thing was to send an email. I'd send an email to all the employees of a company claiming that I was coming from the CFO and going, hey, we decided to merge with our closest competitor. I'd have to look that up on the internet, find out who they were scared of, who's the next upcoming dog. And I'd say, oh, we're merging with so-and-so. Everything's fine. I would use lots of Dilbertism words, like synergy and all this stuff. And then I go, but click here to see if your job or department is going to be in the combined organization. They could not open that email soon enough. But you always try to do things with stressor events. So you're saying things like something's going to be cut off, or you're going to lose this, or your pictures are going away. And even if, a lot of the tech support people have been trained not to fall for social engineering, but they want to help. My favorite is, I'm not going to play this one, but it's if you get the slide deck, if you email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com or talk to conference organizers, you can get my slide deck. Again, if you want my slide deck, rogerg@knowbefore.com. I'll send you the slide deck. But this is a great video of where there's a reporter that wanted to see if this female social engineer could take over his cell phone. And he had told the cell phone company, don't allow it to be socially engineered. I want you to lock it down. Doesn't really work. But she was great. She played 2 videos on YouTube of babies crying in the background, so 2 babies crying, and then she calls up and she acts like her husband's yelling at her because she hasn't switched the phones yet. They're moving and they got to switch phones or something, and she's like, yes, honey, I'm trying, I'm going to get it done. And she tells the person, I was supposed to do this 15 days ago and I didn't get to it because I had to take the baby to the medical appointments. Who doesn't want to help out that woman? And who doesn't think that the husband's a jerk? And she sat there and she took over his account, and she said, oh, my daughter's going to college and I'd like to get her another cell phone, right? And they gave her another cell phone. It's very, very easy to social engineer people because we just want to help. Here's another way to hack people. These are these one-time password tokens or software. So this is where you have this code that's generated every 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. If you've ever had to do one of these, you know the panic of, oh my God, I got to type in the code, I got to type that. And it switched on you, right? But so it's all of these devices, whether it's hardware or software, they work upon that there's this initialization seed value, this random number that's generated, and then there's an algorithm, so it uses that seed number with some type of cryptographic algorithm or hash, and then it many times involves the time, and it creates this new going forward code that's unique. It always has to be in 2 places at once. It has to be on the client implementation or the device that you're using that generates the code. And it has to be synchronized with the back-end database and authentication service that it works with. So that seed value has to be in 2 places at once at least. And a lot of times it's at the vendor, like RSA, may be at RSA, or it could be on your employer's website, on the authentication service, or it could be on the device itself. But it has to be at least in 2 places at once. And if you know that, if you can find that shared secret, that seed value, you can create a virtual instance of this. I was able to do that for RSA Secure IDs many, many years ago, like 15 years ago. There's still a software tool you can download called Cane Enable. It's got all kinds of hacking stuff in it. It's at oxid.it. They have not updated it since Windows XP Service Pack 2. So it's been a long time. It's got all kinds of really cool hacking tools. But one of them was this, where if you had the seed value, the serial number, you'd have to have the serial number of the device, the seed value key. It would just generate this automatic one. And that's what I used to do. I used to break in, steal the seed value database, and then create these virtual instances of the RSA Secure ID. It was actually used in a real-life attack by Chinese APT. Probably, I think it was about 5 years ago. They broke into RSA. They stole a bunch of other vendors' databases, and then they created virtual instances of those RSA Secure ID tokens, broke into it. They broke into Lockheed Martin, and lo and behold, the fighter jet, the F-17A fighter jet they were building, the Chinese made one that looked a whole lot like. If you haven't seen that, they have a whole lot. They have a space shuttle that looks like ours. They have a fighter jet that looks like ours, and they have a commercial airliner. It looks a whole lot like ours that they built for a lot cheaper over there. but they broke in and stole from that. So it does happen. It has been used. The Google Authenticator, how many people here do Google Authenticator? Wow, so about half, yeah. So they send you that QR code usually. So for every website or service or company you're using it for, you get this little QR barcode looking thing, and you have to scan that in. Well, what's interesting about that is that it never expires. You could use it 5 years later, 10 years later. As long as that QR code is around, you can create multiple instances of the same thing. All the secrets that are needed are in that barcode, that QR code, and it's only an 80-bit key. 80-bit keys are very easy to crack, even without the secret. But once you have that, or if an attacker gets that in your email, maybe they do a search for QR codes and deleted emails or something like that, they can create multiple instances that will turn and have the same number as you get. Yeah, there it is. So the QR code has all the necessary secrets to create the same Google Authenticator instance. You can install it on multiple devices at the same time, so can hackers. They love it. Yeah, Eric, I think that's the one I stole from you. But not required downgrade attacks. Almost every multi-factor authentication solution I've ever looked at that's public, you can downgrade it to something less than that. They always have a recovery method because people lose their tokens, the Google Authenticator gets lost, the phone gets lost, or whatever. They always have this backup method, and the backup method is always less than the real method. It is you're like, oh, we'll send you the reset code to your alternate email account. Well, that alternate email account is just protected by a login name and password. Or SMS, we'll send you the code to SMS, whatever it is. What's kind of ironic about downgrade attacks is that means you're using the toughest authentication, but the hacker is using the least authentication. And again, I've yet to see a public option from Microsoft or Google, whoever, that you couldn't downgrade it, that you couldn't somehow claim that you had broken this thing and they will allow you some other way to compromise. So you just go get the list of ways that you can downgrade it, what the recovery methods are. Like, oh, they use this Hotmail account that they hardly ever use. You phish them, get the login name and password for that Hotmail account, log in for that, reset, get their MFA to go into recovery mode and steal it then. So you get these. You always have these recovery emails, or they'll recover to your phone or send you a security code. And of course, if you want to, you can just fake that email altogether. Been done millions of times. This is the absolute worst, though. This is even worse than SMS. The password reset recovery questions, knowledge-based recovery questions. I don't know who thought my mother's maiden name was some type of big secret. Like that is just the most hideous thing. But they have these questions. Sometimes they're preloaded questions. Most of the time, you have to select 2 or 3 and put answers to them. Sometimes you get to create your questions. They're absolutely hideous. It's very easy. Like some of them are like, what's your favorite color? If I'm a guy, we're not choosing fuchsia. Like, we're basically just primary colors, right? It's going to be red. Or like, what was your favorite car? It's probably not going to be a Pacer or a Gremlin. It's probably going to be a Corvette or a Lexus or something like that. But you should never answer these with the real answer. Because look at this. I love this. Google did a survey, or they did a white paper a couple years ago called Secret Lies and Account Recovery, Lessons from the Use of Personal Knowledge Questions at Google. 20% of the time, the recovery questions could be answered by the hacker on the first guess. That's amazing. And then 40% of the time, the legitimate people couldn't remember their own answers. I don't know what the math is because I'm not a polymath science major. I think it means that the hacker is only like 1/6 less likely to answer your question. Maybe they get it first, but it happens all the time that people go use these password reset recovery questions. They should not be allowed. They're no longer allowed in anything that Google owns or Microsoft owns, but the internet is full of them. My Bank of America account requires it. Do not put the real answers. Probably the most high-profile recovery account attack was against Sarah Palin in 2008 when she was running for vice president with John McCain against Obama and Biden or whatever. Some young kid, I say young kid, he was 22. Don't you hate that? Like today, I'm 53 now, and I say, that young kid, they're only 48. Only 48. But it took him 40 minutes to find the answer to all of her questions, to reset, and then he took over her account, published them on 4chan, and then put to the media. He got arrested, went to jail, and he should. But the part that I took the most problem with is they called him a hacker. I'm like, I don't think 40 minutes on Google makes you a hacker. But he said that like it was asked her the high school she went to. Well, she grew up in Wasilla. There's only one high school in Wasilla, and one of the answers was Todd. Bless their heart, they're getting a divorce right now. But, you know, the Todd Pelling was another answer, like first boyfriend or something like that. He said it took him 40 minutes just for the last one, and then he broke in or whatever. But you should never put the real answers in there. You should make up stuff like pizza gobbledygook. You should treat them like passwords of some type. Usually they make you put different answers in different places. The sad thing is you have to write these down. I usually write them down in the password manager, but you can put them down on some type of password protected Word document. If you ever write them down, don't put in the real password. Like if it's pizza gobbledygook, put in PP gobbledygook, you know? Don't put in the real thing. That way someone steals that thing, they're not really getting the answer. But the bad thing is when occasionally they ask me for my recovery questions, I got to go look it up and go, was it pizza $2.95 or pizza $3.64? I just put little codes that I try to remember pizza. By the way, it's not pizza, but it's not too far off. But, you know, I love when people are like, you know, what was your father's maiden name? Pizza. What was your favorite car? Pizza. You do not have to put the real answers in there. You do have to put dates sometimes, like it's like, what was your father's birthday? But I'm like, have they not looked at the internet? Like all of that stuff. One was like my father's middle name. Oh my God. And then one time they were asking for my mother's maiden name. Well, she was married like 6 times. I don't know. I was taking pure guesses. It was not the one I thought. 4 times to the same guy. I knew she was going to divorce. He came up and he was like, hey, you remember when I married your mom? And I thought, no, that's your idea. You have to keep track of that date, not me. Knew something was going on. Biometrics are horrible. They're going to be my vote for the third most terrible thing. Biometrics are not secrets. They were never meant to be secrets. Your fingerprint is everywhere. Your irises and things. Have y'all not seen, what was that, Minority Report with Tom Cruise where he's just walking around and they're scanning his eyes all the time? They're not secrets. They are the most, like if it's a fingerprint, it's everywhere. It's all over your house, your car, your desk. Oh my God. When I was at Microsoft, we actually did a test to see how many fingerprint readers that we could fake with fake fingerprints. And we did stuff like with a Play-Doh and silly putty and all this other stuff. And we used fingerprint dust and all this stuff. It was like 19 out of 21 we could easily fool. And if they're on a cell phone, they're all horrible. They don't really work. And they're not secrets. Once they're compromised, it's gone forever. Like when the U.S. government, when I found out from that June 15th OPM attack, Office of Ombudsman or whatever, that they stole everybody that ever applied for security clearance. So they got my 10 fingerprints, they got my wife's 10 fingerprints when she worked at the shipyard when she was a little girl. She got a letter saying they stole her fingerprints. Everybody's fingerprints. It was like 5.6 million fingerprints, including like all of our spies and the CIA and people that were overseas. And the Chinese stole it. Obama got involved and they gave it back. I'm sure they didn't keep a copy. But my favorite fingerprint attack was on like 17 of the 21 of the fingerprint scanners. You have 2 types of fingerprint scanners. You got the swipe style. That's what most of them are when you're on like a laptop or something like that. But for door entries and stuff, it's a flat scanner. You put your fingerprint there. I could literally cup it and go, and it would activate, humidify the fingerprint oils, and then log me in as the last person that walked into that door. It is not that hard. So we actually recommended and told them when we were at Microsoft, we said, vendors, you should not allow anybody to use the same fingerprint in the same location. It should have to be slightly different before you let them back in. But we did silly putty. I laugh because every time you hear that someone's got some new unhackable biometric thing, there's some 15-year-old kid the next day on YouTube saying he did it for $3. Like they're like, oh no, we use different lights and this or that. No, they all get broken, all of them. And I have biometric people email me, oh, ours is perfect. I'm like, no, you're full of crap. They're not. They're all easy to break. Some of them are harder. And then sometimes, of course, remember, fingerprints have to be stored somewhere, locally on the computer, on a network. I'm not sure which one I prefer because they get stolen all the time. Here's one of the most popular vendors, BioStar. They had their fingerprint and facial recognition databases stolen. They are in the top 50 biometric app vendors, over 1 million fingerprints breached. I mean, again, once your fingerprints are stolen, like mine have been stolen, how can you ever trust anything that ever needs to use my fingerprint? You can't. It's gone. They're really horrible authentication. Authentication is you are who you say you are. Biometrics is anybody. They can be anybody. Hijack and shared authentication APIs. There's a lot of application programming interfaces that work with these different authentication mechanisms. And there's even these shared APIs. Probably the most popular one is called OAuth, open authorization. And that's kind of like when you go to one website to another website, it's like, hey, do you want to use your Facebook account or your Twitter account to log in? Behind the scenes, it's using open authorization. It's the most popular standard. But the thing is, if a bad guy compromises one website or your machine, they get into everything. It's the single sign-on failure, right? So it's really great that you can just, oh yes, use my Facebook account. You know, how often does that get compromised? I think Facebook shared it was something like 2 million Facebook accounts a day get compromised. That's a lot. When I was at Microsoft, it was many millions a day of Hotmail accounts, right? They're automating the trying to recover that it's been compromised. Oh yeah, it was used millions of times against, was it Facebook? I think it was Facebook. Millions of their accounts got compromised that way one month about 2 years ago. Brute force, a lot of the times, when you use a password, you put a login name and password. Almost always, you can only put in a bad password a couple of times. You get that account lockout where it locks it for a certain amount of minutes or until the administrator has to reset it. For some reason, anytime there's a new biometric thing or a new PIN or something like that or some type of new MFA, they never have account lockout. Like somehow the developers spent a year making this new multi-factor authentication app that you have to put into PIN or something, and they don't put account lockout. I don't get it. It's like all of them. This isn't sometimes, it's like all of them. Maybe not Microsoft and Google, but about everybody else. It's happened to, on Android applications. Let's see, one I have up there. I think that was that against Slack? Yeah, Slack. That was against Slack. It's happened against Uber and Facebook and Tesla. And what's amazing about those things is that usually the people report them to the company, and what's their first response? This is not a problem. This is as designed. Right? What's a PIN? A PIN is a number 0 to 9, usually how many digits? 4. Half the time it's somebody's birth date, so you know it's going to be like 0, 1 to 12 on the first 2 characters or whatever. That PIN is really reused across everything. It's not that hard to guess your PIN, and if I have unlimited amount of guesses before I ever be locked out, I'm going to guess. But what I'm amazed when the vendors are told, they're like, oh, it's as designed, and it takes them months. They have to be shamed into updating, which should be something automatic. There's one here. Researcher bypasses Instagram 2FA to hack any account. Yeah, he found out that they actually locked it by IP address, so he just used a bunch of virtual machines from different IP addresses and were able to guess the number. I like this one, yeah. After ignoring for months, Uber finally fixes it after all. After all, what the heck? Which, by the way, I don't know if any of y'all drive for Uber, but I use Uber a lot as company policy. 1 out of every 4 to 6 Uber drivers are absolutely insane. Like, just crazy. And let me say I'm getting used to it, because the other day, where was I? I forget where I was. Carson City. I remember where Tracy was. I was in Carson City, and I opened up the back. There's Tracy. Yeah. And the guy had like a machine gun, a bunch of big knives, I'd never seen brass knuckles in real life, and a gun with a silencer on it. I'm kind of a gun guy. That's mostly illegal in most places, I think most states. Like brass knuckles are just illegal everywhere. So he had just an amazing amount of weapons, and I literally went, I looked at him, I looked inside the car, I didn't see anyone, I was like, the weapons are back here. But I was just thinking, why would you not cover that up with a towel or something? He was just that casual about it. But here's a big, so all multi-factor authentication solutions are buggy as heck. I remember I was at Foundstone and we started to do security reviews on McAfee software. McAfee bought Foundstone. We found thousands of bugs in the McAfee software. There's bugs in all software. The security, it's funny, the people that write security software are no better at stopping security bugs than the people that don't. They seem to sometimes be worse. The problem is none of the colleges teach secure development lifecycle, how to secure, they don't. I think there's, I say none of them. There's like I know of 2 universities that teach secure coding as a class. The rest of it is they get like 8 hours of training out of all the courses that they're learning how to do PHP and Python and all this stuff. They're full of bugs. This one happened in 2017. It's probably the biggest one I've ever known about. I was working for Microsoft. It's called the Roca bug, and I was on vacation when I heard about this and had to get called back in. But basically, Infineon is a company, and they made a bunch of hardware chips, and those hardware chips were the cryptographic generating chips that were used in most smart card creators and readers. They are used on most of the Windows laptops that have TPM chips. The TPM, Trusted Platform Module chips, store the encryption, but it's the Infineon chip that actually created the encryption key. And the small bug was that if it created a public-private key that was 2048 bits or less, which is most keys in the world, that if you found the public key, you immediately could derive the private key. Immediately, times hundreds of millions of devices for years. They just had a bug. And it turned out, instead of it being secret, you could generate it. Not only did, when I was at Microsoft, we had to regenerate like 100,000 smart cards, including first for all the admin people. But what I'm surprised, still to this day, when I talk to people that sell smart cards for a living, I'm like, hey, how did y'all deal with the Roku vulnerability? They're like, huh? Like, they've not even heard of it. I'm like, you're selling this for a living. I hope it's fixed. But they actually had to replace and update software and chips. There are still hundreds, we think hundreds of millions, tens of millions at least, if not 100 million devices out there that still have this bug in it. That people think I'm using a smart card, I'm using TPM chip, everything's cool, and they're not. Again, the physical attacks, I'm coming towards the end here, but just about any fingerprint attack you can think of will work. The facial scan ones will. The facial recognitions for cell phones. I was working with, where are they from? They're actually editors for my book right now. I can't remember it. It's going to be embarrassing if they hear this video and I can't remember my editor's name. But he went and tried like 7 different cell phones, Android and Apple and everything with facial recognition. Not only did he break into them, first try, all of them. Like literally, and he just used like a picture. Just held a picture and they're like, oh no, you got to have this, and we use infrared and all this stuff. It doesn't always work that way. Yeah, there we go. And I love this on smartphones. This was not him, but 42 of the 110, so 40% of tested smartphones failed. But only from Lenovo, LG, Nokia, Samsung. Yeah, nothing important. I'm sure you all have other stuff. And the fingerprint, I use fingerprint on my phone. I'm scared by how little of my finger has to actually touch the phone. Like, I don't know what they're scanning, but it must be just like a millimeter. I think if you have curved ridges, it's letting you into my phone. This one, I got a couple minutes left, but this is kind of neat. If you have electron microscope and you've got the secret key is stored on a chip or some type of device, you can use the electron microscope and find the secret key. So there's actually a Princeton University class that they actually made software that would search TPM chips using an electron microscope. They cost $1 million. That's expensive, not so expensive. Community colleges have them. And literally would search for the TPM private key or the BitLocker private key. Open source software. So you just pulled up a laptop, had a TPM chip, put it under an electron microscope, fired off the software, and it found the secret key, let you break in there. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's within nation state. But the better attack is the memory freeze attack. If you got $8, $8, you go up to a laptop and you freeze. You spend a whole minute with that canned air and you freeze the memory chips. Well, any encryption, decryption keys to work must be in memory in the decrypted state. To work, you freeze the memory chips, take them to another computer, and get the key. That would actually happen to me at Microsoft. The guy showed me. He literally just froze my memory chips on a working laptop, picked the chips out. Turns out they don't even really have to freeze them. A lot of the memory chips today are those solid state memory things, and they hold the information just fine. So literally, if you don't have an electron microscope, sometimes all you need is $8 of canned air. This one, subject hijack, that's too long. I'll go through it. Because we only got a minute or two left. But so what are the defenses? Education. And what I would say, really, and I kind of go over these, make sure the URL is legitimate. I mean, I just showed that as the first Kevin hack, right? If I can trick you into going to a fake website, it's game over. Don't get tricked into running, rogue links. But the big thing is just realize that nothing's unhackable, and make sure that if you have MFA, like I talk to a whole lot of people like, oh, I've got MFA, and it's easy to break into it. If you don't think your MFA is hackable or you're not sure how it's hackable, you can go to our website, which is, let's see if I got it up here. There we go. Go to knowbefore.com/resources, and we have a new security assessment tool. It's called the Multifactor Authentication Security Assessment. We'll ask you 12 or 15 questions about your multi-factor authentication solution, and then we'll print up basically a book, an e-book. I think it's 35 to 70 pages long, and tell you all the different ways that I can hack, anybody can hack your multi-factor authentication solution. Of course, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means it can be hacked. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, and of course, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. But thanks for putting up with me today, and have fun.